Sabihin mo hinaan. Mag-feedbackin.
Isa na kayo dito.
Magandang umaga. Hi, sir. Magandang
Good
umaga.
morning, attorney. Good
We are
morning.
live on Luminous. This is also going to be streamed on DWIZ. We're preempting Karambola today. Para sa inyo,
Oh
sir.
my gosh. Oh, thank you.
How are you, sir? Kamusta na kayo ngayon?
Okay na. Siguro pareho rin yung experience ko ng ibang tao na medyo na sore throat, tapos may konting ubo, may konting sipon. Pero yun lang yung masakit yung lalamunan. That is what happened to me. Nung una, medyo may pakiramdam ako, pero yung sumakit talaga yung lalamunan ko. I'm sure the others have the same experience. Yun ang sinasabi sa akin. Pero ngayon, okay na. Nag-isolate ako na 1 linggo. Panayang test ko na negative na naman lumabas. Pero talagang ibang klase itong Omicron. Ang bilis umikot. At pati si Attorney Vic Rodriguez, aking Chief of Staff, tinamaan. Yung Chief Security ko, tinamaan. Yung last testing, sa staff namin sa headquarters, there were about 68 na staff namin na from the mga campaign workers hanggang sa aming mga delivery, hanggang doon sa aming mga pati yung legal section namin, nawala lahat, tinamaan lahat. So sinara muna namin yung HQ para naman to be safe, although now habang yung mga hindi naman nag-positive, sinabi namin, pumasok muna kayo, mag-repack kasi hindi pa naman tapos yung aming ginagawang rehabilitation at saka pagtulong sa mga victims of Typhoon Odette. So sabi ko, nagbago na yung ating pinapadala, hindi na yung relief goods dahil yung gobyerno maraming pinapadalang pagkain. So ang ginawa namin, yung
Sarap naman pakinggan nun. Maraming nagpapadala.
Ay talaga, alam mo, hindi pa kami, talagang ibang klase ugali ng Pilipino, hindi pa kami humihingi sa yung mga dating kaibigan natin, yung mga dating pinupuntahan na, boss, pahingi naman ng ganito, yung mga relief goods, mga canned goods, ganyan. Hindi, basta nung nabalitaan nila na may bagyo na malaki, nagpadala na sila ng kung ano yung maipadala nila. Nagpadala na, kaya nakapag-respond kami kaagad. Sa totoo naman, yung mga, kasi alam naman natin, may darating na typhoon, may darating na sakuna, magkakaproblema, may masusunugan. So, lagi kaming nangongolekta nitong mga maibigay doon sa mga nasa lantas sa anumang sakuna. So, this is so patuloy na lang yun, ang patuloy. Now, we have opened the headquarters again, pero doon lang para sa staff.
Okay.
Huwag na yung mga walk-in.
Hindi pa pwede yung public.
Hindi pa muna dahil natatakot kami na baka kakalat na naman kaya't kailangan sinusundan lang talaga namin ang mga protocols. Basta't hindi mag-lockdown, yun ang importante para sa akin. Hindi mag-lockdown. Hindi mag-lockdown dahil hindi mag-level 4 dahil nga dito sa Omicron. Dahil ang katotohanan niya, hindi na talaga kaya ng tao na mag-lockdown ulit, na hindi magtrabaho. Talaga, wala na, we're at the very limits already of our capacity to take care of ourselves because of this Omicron.
Salamat pa. Just to this is going to be a 1-hour interview. Tuloy-tuloy po tayo. This will not be interrupted by any ads yet. Okay. But we'll be concentrating on 5 major topics. But towards the end, something like in the last 20 minutes, I'm going to ask you slam book type questions. Uh, sorry po. Yung iba are really questions coming from our viewers, and parang word association, just one sentence reactions to certain names that I'm going to mention. Ha. So, pero what
Alright.
I want to, this is 1 hour. But what I want to hear right now are your plans. So I don't need to keep, I'll just bato ko lang sa inyo yung topic, and I want to know what are the plans, what are your platforms for these following topics. Are you ready? Okay na,
Yes, of
sir?
course. Yes.
Sige. Let's start with my favorite, and I understand yours also, agriculture. How do you see the current agriculture sector? What do you think you can do to strengthen it?
Oh, there's a lot that we can do because we have neglected the agricultural sector for very many years. There has not been any serious development. If you remember, in the mid 80s, there was already a whole system. Kompleto na yung
Yeah.
sistema natin. We had the
Yes.
research in UPLB. We had ERI na 1963 pa yata na established yun. Then Phil Rice was also established under the auspices of the Japanese with Japanese funding. At those were the agencies or the bodies that were doing research for the best varieties for the
Yes.
Philippine condition. Kung maalala ninyo, in the late 60s, meron tayong tinatawag yung miracle rice dahil
Yeah, I remember
uh,
this.
dahil
Uh,
naghanap sila ng mga
Shorter growth
varieties.
periods, more
Tama,
harvests. Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Kaya doon ang pinagbasihan yung Masagana 99. Ang inaambisyon pa lang nila 99 bags per hectare. That's why kaya Masagana 99 yun. So maliit lang talaga. It's not really very ngayon we're talking about double that because if it's
Oh,
let's say
okay.
oh maliit lang ang ano yan, maliit lang na yield ngayon yan, masyado nang maliit ngayon yan. So, then we had already, after that, marami tayong mga assistance sa farmers in terms of technical assistance, in terms of financial assistance, lahat ng inputs, pati yung binhi, binibigay natin sa kanila. Tapos, pagkatapos na magtanim nung magsasaka, bago pa mag-ani, pag mag-aani na, ang pinambabayad sa production loan ay palay dahil hindi pa na-process. Ngayon, ang gobyerno mag-process, sila nagbibigay tayo ng post-production facilities para mag-dry, para mag-mill, yung para linisin yung ating bigas. And then that went to the NFA kasi sila ang nag-store, sila ang sila ang nag-stabilize ng presyo. Kasi pagka
Yes.
panahon
They
ng
compete.
pag-ani, oo, exactly. Pag panahon rice and corn ito nung panahon ng pag-ani ay mababa ang presyo. So bili sila ng
Yes.
bili to maintain the price. Pagka naman tag-init, masyado namang mataas ang presyo, magbibitaw ng supply para bumaba ng presyo. In other words, to stabilize.
That was the
Ngayon,
idea. Yes.
yung hawak ng NFA na bigas, yun, dinadala naman sa tinatawag na FTI, the food terminal. Yun ang bagsakan ng hindi lamang ng bigas, hindi lamang ng mais, kung hindi lahat ng agricultural products. So that was the wholesale. Tapos dinala pag retail para may makabili ng mura, dinagay sa Kadiwa store. Yung Kadiwa store is run by
Yeah.
the government. So hindi dapat kumita 'yan. Kaya't maipagbili nila ng mas mababang presyo kaysa sa mga commercial. 'Yun ang yung Kadiwa store nagkaroon pa ng rolling Kadiwa, yung sinakay na
Yes.
sa truck.
Sa
At
truck.
yun ang sari-sari store umiikot.
Para
Yung mga hindi
barangay.
barangay, yung mga hindi makapunta, lalo yung mga matatanda, yung mga nasa ospital, yung mga may sakit, etc., etc. So, yun ang binuo, yung ganung klaseng sistema. Yun ang palagay ko ating kailangan gawin. At the first phase of that program is the research. Ngayon, meron na tayong global warming, meron na tayong climate change, meron na tayong change in weather. Kailangan talaga natin makahanap ng yung mga varieties na matibay, na hindi madaling masira pagka nagkaroon ng bagyo, pagka nagkaroon ng El Nino, nag-drought, medyo mas matibay-tibay na varieties that will be more resistant to the effects of climate change and global warming. We also, siyempre, we have, when you're talking about agri, sinasabi natin yung crops yan kailangan talaga patubig. Yun ang pinakauna. Kaya improve natin, kailangan natin i-improve ang infrastructure sa farm-to-market roads, sa irrigation. Irrigation talaga is the first, siyempre, is the first thing.
How do you plan to address, sir? Sorry to interrupt you, but one
No.
of our problems is that we have provided funding. Government, in fact, pursuant and in continuation of the projects of your father, pursuant to that and the policy of irrigation, many of our irrigated lands have become privatized and are being
Mm-mm.
sold off as subdivisions. How is
Mm-mm.
government going to intervene in this?
Well, there's the conflict here because if you look at the other side of the coin, we have a very serious problem, housing problem in the Philippines.
That's
I
true.
happen to have been the chairman of the Committee on Housing and Urban Development in the Senate. And I saw very clearly the shortfall, ang kakulangan ng ating pabahay. At that time, we were talking about 5 million houses na kulang. I guess that number has increased by now. So we will have to live with the expansion of residential areas, which means going back again, we need varieties that we can plant that have a higher yield that can be planted because the agricultural lands are sometimes becoming less and less. So kailangan yung yield natin mas maganda, and that's why the research is so important. Para naman yung binhi na ginagamit ng ating mga magsasaka ay yung pinakamaganda para makapagbigay ng magandang return dun sa kanilang trabaho. So
Yes, sir. But that's yes, sir. May I interrupt? Sorry, sir. The fries. I see your program already, but the problem is we are also importing vegetables. Well, our farmers aren't only rice farmers. May vegetables, they're hog
Mm-mm.
raisers, they're chicken raisers. What about our policies for that? We were practically killing the hog industry, and we have prioritized the importation of broilers over our local producers.
There is the problem. We have prioritized importation over local production, and that is where we are now. Kasi it's easier, people make money sa importation. Hindi mo kailangan isipin kung paano aayusin yung, because when you talk about agri, people tend to think only about crops. Agri is crops
Yeah,
and fisheries and
livestock.
livestock.
Uh,
Oo, so
yes.
kailangan ipagsama-sama lahat 'yan. Because kung titignan mo yung actual nutritional value ng kinakain ng tao, kailangan may protein eh. Hindi naman puro bigas lang ang kinakain, hindi puro kanin lang ang kinakain, puro kanin at gulay lang ang kinakain. We need protein in our diets. So you're right, most farmers have, of course, kung meron sila sa tabing o meron sila tabi sila sa ilog, maglalagay ng fish traps yan. Maglalagay ng
Yeah.
pagka naman may alaga na baboy yan, may alaga na baka yan, karamihan. At hindi ba nga yung mga, lalo na sa yung mga backyard livestock na nag-aalaga sa livestock pero sa backyard lang, yung isang baboy naka ano yan, pang Pasko na yan. Ito, pag-graduate ni Junior, ito yung ating
Yun,
ililitsunin.
correct.
Meron na, pati doon sa amin, yung kambing gagawin.
Kambing
Yan
pa
ang
pala.
Oo, yan ang sa ngayon ang situation. But we need,
So,
ang talagang kailangan natin gawin is to
paano nga
make
po?
our agricultural operations, we have to make them more extensive. Sa ngayon, kasi mama and pop operation pa lang, na bumalik tayo sa mama and pop operation. Halimbawa, sa Ilocos Norte, which I'm familiar with, the average land holding is 0.6 hectares. Hindi mo magamit yung mga malalaking traktor, yung mga malalaking harvester,
Hindi
kahit
efficient.
ibigay mo, kasi 0.6 hectares lang eh. Siguro 2-3 oras lang, tapos na yon. Lilipat mo na naman doon sa kami. Kailangan pinagsama-sama natin lahat at para ang operation natin is large scale, para meron tayong savings sa cost of production, kasi large scale, because there are economies of scale, as everyone
Mhm.
understands. And secondly, to be able to compete, because the component, the labor cost component in the cost of production, let's just say bigas, sa palay, uh, of the Philippines compared to Thailand or Vietnam is almost double. In other words, masyado tayong umaasa sa manual labor. Ang
Yeah.
kailangan gawin is mechanization. Luging-lugi talaga, behind na behind tayo sa mechanization. And
But
we
sir,
have to organize our
part
farmers so that we can
yes.
mechanize their operation.
Part of the reason for the inefficiency, I understand that the average one land holding is something like point 0.6 of a hectare, but also part of this is due to land reform. We broke up large agricultural estates so
Mm-mm.
that the individual farmer can have their
Mm.
own land, but there doesn't seem to be support or some kind of infrastructure support to make these small farms more efficient. And
Mm-mm.
what about subsidies? Are we talking about more subsidies now? Every industrialized nation subsidizes their farmers. With the removal of the NFA, supposedly institutionalized yung subsidy na ito. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to well, it seems that there's very little trickle down effect. What are we going to do about this?
Well, the problem is that right now we do not really view them as subsidies. We view them as investments. The question of subsidies also runs into our commitments in the WTO, where the free trade agreements and all that. I think you cannot you if you invest in the agricultural sector, it cannot be viewed as a subsidy. You are investing in you can almost call it, because we are starting back from the square one, an infant
Yes.
industry, if that's what you want to know. We are investing in an infant industry. And although you
Ha.
cannot say that, mahirap siguro yung argument na yun, dahil dahil
Mm.
matagal na tayo nagtatanim ng palay. But the idea is that you're investing in the agricultural sector. You're not subsidizing the industry. You're not subsidizing the price of the commodity. So hindi siguro mag-apply yan, because pinapaganda lang natin ang agrikultura natin.
So,
So the solution that we found, that worked for us in the north, was para kasi 0.6 ang hirap naman masyado yun. Hindi natin
mm,
kailangan yung traktor, dadaan yan 20 hectares yan sa isang araw eh.
isang pasada.
Oo, so
Yes.
dapat talaga ma-organize natin, and that's why ipapatibay natin yung CDA, yung mga cooperatives natin. The Cooperative Development
There
Cooperative
you go.
has
Okay.
to be given they have a very fine mandate, and they have very good people working in CDA. I know that because I was the author of the change of the charter of the CDA charter
Yeah.
when I was in the Senate. Kaya't
Yes.
naintindihan ko, kasi vice chairman ako ng cooperative development eh. So ang maganda na ang kanilang sistema, ngunit kulang ang funding, because the cooperatives at the moment, if you have regional, mahirap, malayo, masyadong pupuntahan, hindi makapunta eh. Mga cooperative, mga magsasaka naman yan, they have to take the day off work, mag-aanap ng
Yes, sir.
pamasahe, maiiwanan yung pamilya. It's not easy. So, one of the new developments is that meron na tayo in each LGU, in the province and in the cities, na magkakaroon ng
Yes.
office ang CDA. Now, we need them to organize all these farmers.
And
So
monitor.
yeah, they have to
Monitor the
organize.
cooperatives eh.
Well, yun ang trabaho naman ng CDA. In fact, they do it all the time. Kung pupuntahan mong CDA, hihingi mo, halimbawa, dito sa probinsya ko, ilan ba yung magagandang cooperative, agricultural cooperative, meron mga housing cooperative, meron mga teachers cooperative. Depende kung ano yung hinahanap mo. Kasi I did work also with the cooperatives when I was congressman, when I was first congressman. Teachers cooperative naman ang binuo namin, bawat bayan. So you can see that there is really a very good opportunity in the cooperative movement to rationalize all of this.
Sir, since we're talking,
The key element
yes,
here is that yes, maybe now kulang tayo sa supply, we will have to import. If we do not import, mababa ang supply, tataas ang presyo. Kawawa naman yung consumer. So, for the short term, we need to import because we have to have that supply and we cannot allow the prices to go much higher. But in the long term, we have to develop our agricultural sector, the crops especially, the livestock especially, and the fisheries. Yung fisheries natin, in many places, yung inland fisheries natin are quite well developed actually. Mahusay talagang Pilipino, basta't bigyan mo ng pagkakataon, turuan mo ng kaunti, they'll pick it up immediately.
since,
Siguro ang pag-asa ng fisheries bukod sa mga inland is sa
yes,
dagat na yung aquaculture.
ah,
There is a statistic that by 2035 or something like that, half of the seafood that will be consumed in the world will be cultivated, will no longer be harvested wild. So, kailangan, let's get in on that market. Archipelagic tayo eh.
correct.
Napakagandang opportunity para sa atin yan. And we have seen the beginnings of it. Doon na naman sa amin, kami nag-fingerling kami development, pinagbili namin doon sa mga nag-grow out sa Pangasinan, and that they are already growing yung mga high value na seafood na nasa dagat. So these are all possible to be developed. Kailangan lang nating turuan. The
Right.
other, because the fisheries, it's okay to go, it's still okay to go
Uh,
out. Pero yung mga overfish na yung ibang lugar sa atin eh. Kaya kailangan na yung malalaking bangka, but they have to go out mga ilang kilometro, 12 kilometers outside already eh. Para meron silang mahuli. So, bigyan natin sila ng malaking bangka. Bigyan ng mga isa pwede natin gawin. If you remember, there was a program na sumunod sa Masagana 99 noon na nagbigay na nga ng bangka. I forgot the name of the program, but that was another part of the yung sa livestock.
yeah, KKK din po yung program na yan.
KKK, it was based in KKK. Oh, it was based sa KKK livelihood. Yung sa livestock, ganun din. We need to teach, we need to help, we have to find the better varieties. Yung aming ginagawa, namimigay kami, nagdi-distribute kami ng mga inahin. Ito, baboy itong pinag-usapan namin. Mga inahin. Tapos pag nanganak na, meron nanganak na yung inahin, ikukunin na naman, dadalhin na naman sa ibang farmer para ulit. Pero syempre yung mga biik nandun na sa farmer, nasa kanila na yun, tuloy-tuloy na yung kanilang livestock. So there are many schemes that we can do to increase the production of crops, of livestock, and of fisheries here in the Philippines. Hindi lang talaga natutugunan ng ilang taon na, except maybe in the time of ERAP when he established the Carabao Center. But that was the precursor to the rest of his agricultural program. So we have to continue because naiiwanan tayo, and napakasakit kuminsan pakinggan when we talk to our friends in Vietnam and in Thailand. They always say everything we're doing we learned there. Galing kami sa UPLB, doon kami natuto. Kaya itong nagawa namin dahil tinuro nyo sa amin sa PhilRice, tinuro nyo sa amin dito sa UPLB. And then they ask, what happened? What happened sa inyo? Ba't di nyo nagagawa? Mahirap sagutin. So that we can go back to that. The templates are really quite
They're established. We
very
have
it's
theory.
ang tawag it's a tawag diyan, it's a mature technology actually, and there's no need to invent anything anymore.
Again.
Oh, don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just follow what worked before, invest in that success. But as you can see dito sa discussion natin, we've been talking for what 20 minutes on agriculture. You know, agriculture, people tend to think, agri, yung nagtatanim yung magsasaka. Hindi. It's a very, very complex, it's a very extensive, it has to be a very extensive system if you are going to guarantee food supply in the Philippines. Kung yun ang end result na hinahabol natin is sapat na food supply, ay talagang makikita natin, we will be that this is the way to go. And we
Sir,
have to do it
one
because
last.
one of the first conclusions that we arrived at when the pandemic arrived last year was naipit kaagad ang food supply natin because we have become so dependent on importation.
On importations.
So
Correct.
talagang iwasan na natin yan. Alam naman natin magkakaroon ng sakuna, magkakaroon ng problema. Kung magtampuhan tayo ng Thailand, ayaw na tayong bigyan ng bigas. O meron nagka-issue yung isang domestic worker doon, kung ano-anong nangyari, mag-aaway tayo ng kaunti, magtatampuhan ng kaunti, ayaw tayo bigyan ng bigas. Paano ngayon tayo? Hindi ba? It's anything can happen. We have to have a sufficient supply. Hindi naman, kung nag-aambisyon tayo mag-export, ibang usapan yan. Pero if we're talking about
export, okay.
you have to do many more things.
I understand. Kailangan nating ambisyonin yan. Pero right now, I'm still aiming for let's feed ourselves. So,
well, we are looking for is self-sufficiency. We can assure ourselves, we can assure the people that whatever happens, they will have something to eat. Meron silang kakainin, merong food supply na sapat. These are the things that we are looking for. And if that's what it is, you do not need to produce 100% ng inyong pangangailangan. You maybe if you can produce in the 90s, 90%, 97%, basta wag kasi may mga ibang klaseng bigas, syempre mga specialist, yung mga organic, yung mga ganon, yung mga pangmayaman. I-import natin yun. Pwedeng i-import yun.
Speaking of pangmayaman, thank you. Kasi I have another topic, this time my topic. Sorry po. During your father's term, during your father's term was the first and one of the biggest pushes for the conservation and development of Philippine culture and arts. In 1968, there was the first Conservation Act that was passed under your father's term. He created the National Artist Awards. He was the first to designate cultural property and national historical landmarks. Yes. Now, we have a law enacted in 2009 called the Heritage Act of 2009, which supposedly takes all of these into consideration, but has been very, weakly implemented. So now we have this law, but what I need to hear is what is our direction for culture and arts now? Because everything is in there. There's tourism, there's education, there's national identity. What are your plans for this sector? I have so many high hopes because of the Marcos years. What about the second Marcos year?
Well, that is precisely the message that we have been going around and talking about, yung aming sinasabi na unity, na pagkakaisa. And I'm sometimes asked, what do you feel is the most important legacy that your father left to the Philippines? And of course, marami siyang achievement in terms of all of the systems that were put in place. But I think the most important legacy of my father was a sense of nationhood. And then when we at the time felt very strongly about how being Filipino. And we had a very clear idea that Pinoy ako, ganito kami, ganito. And the reason why that happened is because a culture, it is a shared sense of self, right? It is the
Yes.
definition of ourselves as Filipino, because you start number one, as you define yourself, number one, you're a human being. Number two, you're male or you're female. And what's next? I'm Filipino. And that's how fundamental it is. But unless there is a um, uh, a shared understanding or a shared notion, a shared idea of what a Filipino is, then you cannot identify yourself as a Filipino. And that was it was so important that if we're going to get beyond regionalism within the Philippines, that we only consider ourselves Ilocano, we only consider ourselves Tagalog or
There you
Bicolano
go.
or Bisaya or Waray or whatever else you care to categorize us. We had to get a little bit beyond that. Of course, we're very proud where we come from, and that will never go away. But we have to get a little bit beyond that and say we are, in fact, Filipinos, and that's all part of the Philippines. And that is
Yes.
why it was so important that we understand our history, that we understand where we came from, how we came to this place, how we arrived
Yeah.
at this. Why is it that we speak the language that we speak? Why is it that our political system is the way it is? Why is it that we do things the way that we do? Those are the things. And part of that is to recognize the landmarks in our history, literally the landmarks and figuratively the landmarks in our history. Kaya
Evidence.
tayo
Yes.
nagkaganyan dahil sa yung panahon ng Kastila, ganitong nangyari. Nung panahon ng Amerikano, ganito yung nangyari. Nung nagkagera, ganito yung nangyari, etc., etc. So this is and my mother was
Yes.
very much part of that,
Yes.
because ang lagi niyang sinasabi is that she was trying to reintroduce the soul of the Filipino to Filipinos themselves, and then eventually to the rest of the world, which I think
So,
ang dami niyang scholar ngayon. Nung panahon nila,
yun.
marami tayong mga national artists, marami pa tayong mga international artists na hanggang ngayon sikat na sikat. So the what we have to do is remember, if you remember, we even have the Makiling High School for Arts. That was really to develop local arts. The original name of the theater in the complex of the culture was Folk Arts Theater. The
Yeah.
Folk Arts Theater was there to promote folk art, yung ating local. Hindi na yung magdadala din tayo ng mga sikat. Siyempre, gusto natin manood ng mga singer ng mga international. Pero, nandyan yung Folk Arts Theater really was para to promote our local art, our local performers, our local artists, lahat yan. And that's what the whole cultural center concept was about. And that's why it really came from a very fundamental desire for the Filipinos to once again feel part of this culture, which is a
So
shared.
how are
What
we
is
going to do it?
well?
I mean, there's a law. I don't know
Again,
if you have a legislative agenda for this.
well, we have the
But
law. But as you play, alam mo naman dito sa Pilipinas, sapat ang batas. Kulang lang talaga lagi sa implementation, kulang sa funding. Kasi hindi napaprioritize. Kasi siguro, yung mga sabi, hindi naman importante yan eh. Ano ba yung may statwa dyan, may ganito dito, hindi naman importante yan eh. I-privatize na lang natin lahat yan. Hindi ba? Hindi na trabaho ng gobyerno yan. I disagree. And if they're talking solely about returns, when you have a very strong culture, look at the Southeast Asian countries around us. Let's start with Thailand. Thailand has a Ministry of Temples, Ministry of Culture, and Ministry of Tourism. Tatlo yan, para lang sa kultura. South Korea, ganun din. Meron silang ganyan. Vietnam, meron din silang ganyan.
I'm painfully aware.
Tayo kailangan natin balikan yan. Importante yan. Because what is a culture? A culture is a shared consciousness. And we have to have a consciousness to share. And we have to explain to people, ito tayo, ito ang pagka-Pilipino. Kaya't nung panahon na kailangan balik tayo sa panahon na sikat ang Pilipino. Hindi, Pinoy ako eh. Hindi, galing ako Pilipinas eh. Sikat niya, alam mo itong mga kasama natin, magagaling lahat yan. And we can do that because we have made a name for ourselves with our OFWs. Kilalang-kilala na sila that they know what they prefer to have Filipinos. We speak good English, we're hard workers, we're well-trained, we are honest, we're even clean. Meron pang kasama ko minsan na ganyan.
But,
So all
sir,
of this, that all derived from that desire to remind
so
ourselves of that shared consciousness of being a Filipino.
So it's going to be by directive because yeah, we do have a law. It has some quirks eh. Kailangan pang ayusin yung batas. But what we need to see is that there is something coming from the highest office of the land saying that okay, LGUs, everybody, this is part of governance because in fact, how can you have governance if you don't know your own culture, you don't know your own history? Then even when we make laws, we can't make laws if we know that it isn't even compatible or with our culture and our practices.
Exactly. There are things that work very well for maybe another country that will not apply here simply because that's not the way we do things. That's not how we think. But you see, from that shared consciousness, halimbawa, maliwanag na yung pagka-Pinoy natin, pati mga bata, naintindihan nila na ito yung kasaysayan ng ating bansa, ito yung mga pangyayari sa ating bansa. Tapos ang ugali ng Pilipino, ganito talaga, yun ang itinuturo ng mga magulang. And from there, we will know, sige, ano pang kulang natin? Ano bang kulang ng sambayanan? Ano bang kailangan ayusin? Ano ba? And everyone, because nga we are aware of that shared consciousness, we know more or less what it is that the whole country needs, and we will work towards that. Yan pala. O sige, pagandahin natin, magtulungan tayo. Because Pinoy tayo, kailangan natin tulungan yung kapwa nating Pinoy. And it's not an easy thing to do, but Filipinos are very culturally oriented. We are. We pick up on all of these things very quickly. Because
Well,
nakaligtaan lang eh, hindi na papag-usapan. Pag napag-usapan yan, ganun nga pala, tama, naalala ko, ganyan pala eh. Kinikwento ng aking ninuno, kinikwento ng lolo ko, ganun pala yun.
while we're on the topic, sir, since kultura na lang na, I would like to segue. This is an important question for our viewers. How are you going to manage your family and friends when you become president? Many administrations fail because there are people we can't say no to. It's our nature kasi we're very communal, we're very,
Yeah.
together. So, pagka nahindihan ng pamilya, minsan nagtatampo. So now, you're going to be in a position where people will be constantly coming to you. They'll be other administrations have suffered from this. No
That is
matter how
true.
good they were, it became a problem later on. How
Yeah.
are you going to manage this?
Hindi ba, kaya speaking of shared consciousness and culture, hindi ba, the greatest strength of the Filipino is kayang pakiusapan.
Yun
Pero
na
that
nga
seems
eh.
to be, that seems to be also our greatest weakness. Kasi kaya nga pakiusapan, hindi na nasusundan yung rules. The only solution to that is to run it as professionally as possible. If there is a job that needs to be done, don't get your cousin. Get only unless your cousin is the recognized expert in that field, the best Filipino that you can find to work in that field. No, run it professionally. Run it professionally
Yes.
and make sure that the people who are in their place in whatever position in the government know their job and are very good at their job, because you cannot be wasting time and resources with people who are not doing their work or who do not know their job or have no good ideas. To pull ourselves out of this economic situation that the pandemic brought, we are going to have to to be imaginative and to come up with new new solutions. Look at what is happening in technology. There are things that are happening before that we never thought were going to be actually possible. It looked like magic, but it's because people are thinking uh, in may tawag lateral thinking, the tawag out of
Yes.
the box, all of these things.
Creative
But we have
thinking,
to
yes.
be creative. We have to be imaginative, and to do that, you have to have the best people around you. And no matter how good you are, tama yung sinabi mo, kahit gaano kagaling yung namumuno, kung lahat ng tao niya ay tamad o mahina, hindi marunong, hindi alam ang
Or
trabaho, eh
pakiusap.
wala rin mangyayari. Yun na nga yung
yung,
pakiusap.
yung
Well, alam
pakiusap
mo
eh.
naman, alam mo naman there's always a way. Ano mo yung alam mo naman sa buhay naman there's always a way to compromise kung ano man yung pangangailangan. But let us not compromise the performance of government. Because when government's performance is compromised, it affects immediately tens of millions of people. And so
That's
that's
true.
what we have to watch out for. That's why it's important that you are very assured as a leader, you are very assured that the people that you are going to appoint, or the people that you are going to bring into government, are the best that you can get. That's and despite
That's
alam
a
mo, and
ano.
we'll go beyond kamag-anak, and may kaibigan na may utang na loob ka, whatever it is, di ba, yung tinulungan ka sa kampanya, you will,
Mm.
they want to be put in some kind of position. You
Reward
know,
yun eh.
yeah, it's yung mga reward, yung mga reward na gano'n. Pero hindi pa rin eh. You really have to find the best people and get to go beyond that kamag-anak and kaibigan.
Mm.
Not only do you have to find the best people, you have to make sure that they are properly performing. Pagka hindi naman tama, hindi na tama yung ginagawa, eh kailangan
Management
sitahin
na
mo.
yan.
Oo, you have to
Alright.
manage. Magagaling naman na yan eh. So that's really the only I don't think there are any magic bullets to this kind of this kind of situation. And again, to go beyond also the kamag-anak and the kahit hindi mo kapartido. Kasi kahit linabanan ka nung last election, bakit magaling talaga. Siya talaga yung marunong sa
Yeah, yeah.
hog racing. Oh, lapitan mo, sabihin mo, tapos na yung eleksyon, tulungan mo na kami. Pare-pareho naman ang gusto natin eh. Pareho naman natin gustong pagandahin ito. Tulungan mo na lang ako. At kung ano bang kailangan mo para magawa natin ito. Dapat ganun ang approach. Hindi kagaya yung nangyayari. Lahat ng ginawa nung nakaraan, pangit lahat yan. Tigil natin lahat yan. Hindi. Tignan natin, baka may nagawang tama. Hindi ituloy natin. Itong kay Pangulong Duterte, yung kanyang build, ang pakagandang programa yan na kanyang ginawa. Yung kanyang ginawa sa education, SUCs, ginawang libre, napakaganda nun. These are the things that you should recognize. Not just say, ako lang ang marunong. Maraming marunong ng Pilipino, ang gagaling ng Pilipino. You have to get them all to help. It starts from that national consciousness, that the appreciation of our culture,
That's looking
the
for, yeah.
understanding of what a Filipino is and what the Filipino needs. It all binds together. Kaya ginawa yan nung panahon ng aking ama dahil it was necessary part of our nation building.
And still is. Okay, next. One sentence answer, sir. I'll just give you a name or a
Ang hirap
phrase.
naman.
Alam ko.
Okay, all right. Okay, I will try
But
to be
it's social media, sir. So
try to be
we
concise.
have to adapt. Okay, first. One sentence response lang. Off the top of your head, Sara Duterte.
Best partner I could have had.
Love it. Nora Honor.
Oh, I'm a big fan.
I knew it. Conrad Banal. Because,
Isa pa yan. Conrad,
hindi naman kami hindi naman kami nagpa-plugging.
has always something worthwhile to listen to say.
Ayan. Renewable energy.
Oh, absolutely necessary in the face of climate change.
The University of the Philippines.
Well, it's still the premier. Still the premier learning institution in the Philippines, and must be well supported by government.
And TFL, Kak?
Expand.
Uy, like that. Universal healthcare law.
Absolutely necessary. Also, now we have to implement it properly.
Do you think it's only implementation?
Well, it's funding. Funding is
Yes.
becoming the problem, especially dito na napunta lahat ng pondo sa healthcare sa pandemic. So hindi pa talaga na implement ng mabuti yung universal healthcare. But it's again something close to me. Pero kailangan din bantayan because all the universal healthcare programs of other countries bankrupted those countries. And so we have to be careful on how we apply the universal healthcare law.
Free tertiary education.
Uh, long delayed,
Ah,
policy.
expand.
SUCs, basta't
Expand.
SUCs. Oh,
All
SUCs.
right. Uh, um, Art Tugade.
a good a good partner in government.
Right. Alright. So I have a few more minutes. One more. Okay. My other concern is the internet. Okay. We have difficulty with a duopoly and a new third party coming in, but doesn't seem to be working. We're not getting cheaper, faster, better internet service. What are we going to do with this?
That is a huge problem. That has been highlighted by the pandemic. We were already headed towards the metaverse, as it's now being called. But we were already headed to depend our greater dependence on the digital infrastructure. Of course, the pandemic accelerated all of that because napunta pati schooling, napunta roon pati yung mga ibang bagay na dating ginagawa nating face to face, napunta lahat sa internet. And so I'm not quite privy to why it is still not, after all the promises that we have heard over so many years, but di pa nabubuo yan. Because if we look at the other countries, again, is another area we do not have to reinvent the wheel. Uh, one of the most, one of the best examples of infrastructure, of digital infrastructure, is South Korea. So let's send people to South Korea and ask them, how is it? How did you do this? What are the things? And we won't adopt your technology. We'll adopt the latest technologies that are available. Kasi kahit 5G na sila, matagal ng 5G yan. Tingnan natin yung mga bagong 5G. Tingnan natin yung mga bagong sistema, yung mga bagong equipment, the hardware, the software. So I think it's because we have to. There's a very funny arrangement with our basically two basic internet providers, in that we have to put, again, I think it still makes sense for the government to have the backbone, its own backbone na pinapagamit
There you go.
sa mga telco. And
All right.
that is an investment that can be done. And this brings us to another some other concept that I think we should really encourage, and that is the PPP. The government cannot do everything. The private sector cannot do everything. But a partnership between government and private sector can do very many things very, very well. It's
Okay.
just
Very
not
quickly.
easy to do. Mm-mm.
Very quickly now, because we have OFWs watching and hanging on to your every word. In 2 sentences, what is your program for OFWs? How do we plan for their retirement? How about their healthcare? How about their safety while they're abroad?
The solution has come to us in now the newly created Department of Migrant Workers, and that is the problems that have been arising for our OFWs. Instead of depending on imaginative funding and imaginative like the DFA hihingi ng pera sa justice, kukuha ng abogado. There's no formal institutionalized method for helping our OFWs, and that will be it. For those who are returning, tapos na ang kontrata, mag-retraining tayo, ginagawa na natin yan noon mag-retraining tayo para makabalik ulit sila sa trabaho. Yung mga naipit dito, napilitang umuwi, kausapin natin yung pinanggalingan nilang bansa at sabihin natin, ibalik na natin yung mga, since mula ng pandemya, o pabawas na yung pandemya, unahin nyo naman, i-prioritize naman ninyo yung mga Pilipino na nagtrabaho na dyan, na kinala naman ninyo ng magandang kanilang trabaho. So but there are lots of other, meron na tinanong ako na isang araw, pabahay din ng ating mga
Yes.
umuuwing OFW, yung kanilang health benefits. Kasi iniwanan na nga nila yung korporasyon nila, those benefits no longer apply pag nandito sila. So the universal health care, that we can apply that, we can make sure that it's applied properly. These are marami, you know, the simple way to approach all of the issues that surround OFWs is to recognize their contribution to the country and what they have done for the Philippines over, I don't know, we're close to 50 years already. And they kahit papano, the recognition of the world that Filipinos are good workers are because of them. And they have been good ambassadors for our country. And they have been they have been keeping the economy in the difficult times, have been keeping the economy above water. There's no other way to put it. And so we must recognize that, and we should return to them at least a part of what they have given to the Philippines.
Okay, this one might take a while, but there are two aspects to this question. Um, we've asked a lot of things of what you are going to be doing for the country. My turn to ask, what can we do for you when you become president? Sorry, when you become president, what do you want us to do?
We want, well, what would be most important, of course, would be to work again for national interest, for the nation building. Let us recognize that it is time to return to the concept of nation building. Partisan politics has taken too large a part of our national discussion. And it plays a part. Of course, politics cannot be avoided, but once the part of politics has been played, I think that yung kagaya ng sinabi ko, when we are hiring people, we hire the best. We do not hire because they belong to your party. We hire the best. And that is, I think, the most important thing is that we keep politics in its place. And we always have in our minds the national interest, always have in our minds nation building. It is a phrase that I grew up with, and it was the sole motivating factor, I think, behind the work of my father. And I have adopted that. And I say, let us do what is good for the country. Let us build this nation up. This is not the work of a day. This is a work of a long time, but at least we should start to put in the institutions, the organizations, and the policies in place. Like President Duterte is complaining, hindi niya matapos sa 6 years yung gusto niyang gawin. And 6 years actually is not a long time for a president to do all the work that he has to do. But you can start. You can strengthen the institutions that you know are going to be necessary to have a stable political system. You have to put in the different elements within the economy, so that our economy is strong and a vibrant part of the global economy. That's very important because we have to think globally now. And so what we need is for people to be working in the right direction, in the same direction, which brings us back again to what you started with the shared consciousness. Let us always remind ourselves we are Filipinos, and no one is going to help Filipinos except Filipinos themselves. But the good part of that is that we have the capabilities. I am so confident that if we tap into the abilities, the industry, the resourcefulness, the kindness, the grace of Filipinos, and we tap into that properly, I am so confident that we will succeed as long as we're working together, understanding what needs to be done, and sacrificing ourselves for the country. That is the most important thing.
One last, we have a short time. I have had the good fortune of representing many heroes in the Philippines. Combat veterans,
Mm,
people who have been nominated for medals of valor. They're
mm,
alive, they're serving in the AFP.
mhm.
Um, the AFP's morale is high from this administration. I need a message from you to them. What can you say to our gallant men and women serving in the armed forces? They have been so visible and tirelessly working, particularly in civil defense during the last major typhoon.
Yes. Well,
What message do you have for them?
they should be they should be commended for all the work that they do. I always say we must understand that the military, the uniformed services, are the only part of society uh, whose social contract with the state includes putting life and limb in danger. That social contract is only for the men and women in the military, and that is what us civilians we have to recognize, that we are in fact we although they are quiet, they are in their camps, they are not in our they're not in our everyday dealings, but that they are there and that they are protecting the state, they are protecting the republic, and they are protecting the Filipino people, and we must recognize that. For them to do their jobs, we must also respect the culture within the military, and that we must allow the military to run itself. Because iba ang patakbo ng militar, iba ang patakbo sa civilian. Kailangan natin kilala, yung mga opisyal dyan, ang gagaling ng mga opisyal natin, yung mga tropa natin, ang tatapang, kailangan talaga ay lahat ng suporta na ibibigay na kailangan nila ibigay natin hangga't kaya natin. Dahil itong mga ito ay itinataya na nga ang buhay para sa atin. The least we could do is to give it back. But again, right now, the military right now has uh, uh, has a big job to do, continuing big job to do. Although they have had some very good successes in the past few years, and again, we must commend them for that, the sacrifices that they've made. They have sacrificed life and limb over and over and over again for the sake of the safety and of the rest of the country. Kaya must always recognize that. And I always remind when I talk to soldiers, lalo na yung mga na-wounded na pinupuntahan namin yung mga sugatan na pinupuntahan namin sa ospital, sabi niya, sinasabi ko sa kanya, baka akala ninyo hindi namin alam ang inyong ginagawa dahil nasa area kayo, nasa kampo kayo, hindi nyo naririnig ang usapan ng civilian population. Na kami ay talagang alam namin ang inyong ginagawa, alam namin ang tapang ninyo, alam namin ang sakripisyo ninyo. Kaya dapat naman, kung anong magagawa namin para tulungan kayo at maging mas maganda ang patakbo ng inyong trabaho, gagawin natin.
One more, wait, time pa. Your grandmother, I understand, was a teacher. Your
Yes,
paternal grandmother was a teacher.
that's
My
right.
grandmother was the same. Message for our teachers. They're waiting for their salaries again. There were some before, but we still haven't brought them up to industry standard. Message for them, please. And what are our plans for uplifting the condition of our public school teachers?
Well, I have always considered all teachers, all of them. I consider them all heroes, because we have to again. You have to remember, parang sundalo yan eh. It is a calling. Teaching is a vocation. It's not a profession. It's not a job. Like I always say, may kilala ka bang teacher na milyonaryo? Wala. Hindi naman nag-teach yan, hindi nagtuturo yan dahil gusto nilang yumaman. Gusto nilang turuan ang mga bata para yung mga bata handa sila sa buhay nilang parating na buhay nila. They want them to be prepared. And that is their vocation. And that's why we have to support. Nakikita naman natin, the teachers are having to do all kinds of other things. Pagka yung sweldo nga nila hindi na late, magpa 5-6 na yan, malulubog na sa utang yan, hindi na habang buhay na yan, nandiyan nakaipit na sa kanilang mga utang. Kaya tulungan natin ang teacher, not only financially, make sure, simple lang naman, bagay na yung kanilang sahod na makuha nila ng tama. And we should more benefits also. We should do more for their families so that they do not worry about their families. They worry about their students and teaching. Hindi nila kailangan naalala, yung anak ko may sakit, wala akong pambayad ng doktor, wala akong pambili ng gamot. Dapat hindi na nila kailangan dapat iniisip yun. I think speaking about teachers, you're ending up talking about the whole educational system. We really have to, with the new remote learning, we have to really try and make it better. The digital infrastructure obviously comes into it. But we have to think beyond the pandemic, and that our educational system has to be upgraded. And the first part of that is the support that we have for the teachers, not only financial support, but also support in terms of the infrastructure, the classrooms, the school buildings, the materials, the supplies, the school supplies, the equipment that they have. If you look at a normal public school, how many of them have computers? It's 2022. Ang dami sa kanila walang computer. Mga bata hindi pa nakahawak ng computer, yung Game Boy nila at saka yung smartphone ng magulang nila, pero hindi sila humahawak ng computer. That's fundamental already in the year 2022. So something as simple as that, the equipment, I go to places, meron pang ginagamit na Marcos School building. The Marcos School buildings were put up in 1967, 68. Dapat yan 20 years, 25 years lang yan, papalitan na yan, babaguhin na yan. Nandiyan pa rin. Kaya yun, yung mga facilities kailangan natin ayusin. And the teachers, not only financial, not only in terms of benefits, but also in terms of refresher courses, retraining. Ang bilis ng takbo ng teknolohiya, for example, even social systems, political systems, economic systems are moving very, very quickly. And the teachers have to have a good awareness of what's happening in the rest of the world, so that the teachings that they are giving their students are relevant to the global economy, are relevant to this new world that we are in, this technologically driven world that we are in. So it is not only hardware, it is not only finance, it's also software. And ang teacher, ang daling, syempre teacher yan eh. Madaling turuan ng teacher. We're talking about yung delayed na sweldo. Nung una ako naging congressman, yun ang nakita kong problema dun sa distrito ko. So nagtayo ako ng cooperative sa bawat bayan ng teachers cooperative para hindi na sila magpa 5-6, meron silang savings and loan, binigyan namin ng konting seed money, and they're very successful. So simple things like that we can do to help the teacher's condition, the teacher's plight. Then pag-isipan natin, pag magkapera tayo, bigyan natin ng scholarship yung mga anak nila.
There you go. Thank you very much. I understand you have another interview lined up for 10 o'clock, so I apologize to the person who is next interviewing you. But I would like to thank you very much. And one last na talaga. A message to those who are watching you on Luminous.
Well, I thank you very much for showing an interest and being part of this discussion that we are having with Attorney Trixie, talking about some of the issues of the day. You know that we are still in the middle of the pandemic, and I know that pagod na ang tao na dito sa mga protocol natin, pero pagtiyagaan po natin, mag-iingat lang po tayo, balikan natin yung dating protocol. Sana naman, pagka ganun ang ating ginawa, matatapos na itong problema na ito. But in the meantime, ako'y nagpapasalamat sa lahat ng nagpapahayag ng suporta at tiwala sa unit team, sa aming dalawa ni Inday Sara, at sana ipagpatuloy po natin itong ating advokasya ng pagkakaisa hanggat tayo'y magtagumpay. Hindi lamang sa halalan, kung hindi sa ating kilusan ng pagkakaisa ng sambayan ng Pilipino. Maraming salamat. Salamat, Attorney Trixie. Salamat sa lahat ng mga taga-subaybay at magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat.
Maraming salamat, sir. Para dun sa mga nanonood, may karambola pa po afterwards. Salamat, sir. In 2 years, I want to interview you again and let's see where we are in your programs and plans.
Oh my
Thank you
gosh.
very much.
Thank you, thank you,
I'm,
thank you.
thank you, sir.